started with a lie that spread just fast enough and hit just hard enough to create a motive for murder. But by the time anyone figured out what was true and what wasn't, one man was lying on the sidewalk bleeding out, another was running for his life, and a small Oregon neighborhood was waking up to the first horrifying gunshots of the afternoon. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. This is how a single accusation, whispered between two people, ignited a deadly chain reaction that ended with the murder of 25-year-old Nathan Anderson and a week-long manhunt for the man police say pulled the trigger, 26-year-old Cody James Denowith. But the story didn't begin with the gunshots. It began hours earlier, inside a house where desperation, paranoia, and anger had already taken control. On April 29, 2024, just after sunrise, Clackamas County was still quiet. It was the kind of morning where nothing felt out of place, until it suddenly was. While neighbors prepared for their day, Cody James Denowith was pacing, irritated, scattered, and, according to detectives later, primed for something violent. He wasn't alone. Inside the house with him was 26-year-old Dominique Britt, the woman who would become central to understanding Cody's state of mind. At some point that afternoon, Dominique told Cody something that would escalate everything. She claimed that Nathan Anderson had sexually assaulted her. Detectives would later say they found no physical evidence to support the claim. But in that moment, Cody didn't wait for proof. He didn't calm down. He didn't think. He snapped. Witnesses later told police that Cody's reaction was instant rage, pacing back and forth, demanding answers, demanding a plan, demanding something to do with the anger now boiling inside him. Now, here's where the story turns from emotional to dangerous. Cody didn't just get angry, he got organized. Phone records, later reviewed by detectives, show that Cody began sending a string of messages. Angry, erratic, and deeply incriminating messages. One message stood out more than most. "I need help taking this dude out." The meaning couldn't have been clearer, and the timing matched perfectly. He sent it shortly after Dominique's accusation. Investigators would later use those messages as evidence that the shooting was not a moment of impulsive anger, but a premeditated attack. After those messages, Cody didn't sit still. He grabbed his Sig Sauer P365, later confirmed by ballistics to be the gun used in the shooting, and walked out of the house with a clear objective: find Nathan Anderson. Police would later reconstruct the timeline through CCTV, witness interviews, and Cody's digital breadcrumbs. One piece of footage became especially important. A security camera overlooking a nearby street captured a silver sedan passing slowly through the neighborhood. The car had no plates, just as witnesses later described Cody's vehicle. It wasn't moving normally. It wasn't commuting. It was circling, looking, waiting, hunting. That silver sedan would appear again and again, on cameras facing different streets, creating a moving map of Cody's search. At the exact same time, Nathan Anderson was walking near Southeast Orland Avenue, unaware that someone was already tracking his location. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't armed. He wasn't prepared for anything violent. He was just walking, and Cody was closing in. Just before 5:30 p.m., neighbors heard the first sound. Not a shout, not an argument, not a car horn, a gunshot. Witnesses described it as sharp, close, and too loud to be fireworks. When they stepped outside, what they saw was Nathan Anderson, stumbling backward, already injured, trying desperately to escape. But Cody wasn't done. Not even close. Cody stepped out of the silver sedan and began firing again. Multiple rounds, hitting Nathan as he collapsed near the sidewalk. Each shot was captured in the clusters of shell casings detectives later recovered. Ballistics would confirm it without question. Cody's Sig Sauer P365 matched every casing on the ground. The attack lasted only seconds, but the damage was irreversible. Nathan was bleeding heavily, struggling to breathe, drifting in and out of consciousness as neighbors rushed to help. Someone called emergency services. Another ran outside with a towel. A third knelt beside Nathan, trying to keep him awake. But Cody ran back to his silver sedan, jumped in and sped away, leaving Nathan on the pavement, fighting for his life. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Paramedics arrived quickly and found Nathan in critical condition. He had multiple gunshot wounds to his chest and torso. Despite the severity, Nathan was still alive. He was transported to OHSU Hospital, where trauma teams fought to stabilize him. He held on as long as he could, but the damage was too extensive. Nathan Anderson died at the hospital. He was 25 years old. News of the shooting spread fast. Within hours, police identified their primary suspect, Cody James Denowith. The description of his vehicle matched the circulating security footage, and the motive, based on Dominique's accusation, now appeared as the spark that started everything. But Cody wasn't about to turn himself in. He wasn't finished running, and he wasn't alone, because while officers were securing the crime scene, interviewing witnesses, and reviewing footage, detectives were also looking for someone else. Dominique Marie Britt. Her story didn't match itself. Her timeline didn't match Cody's. And her accusation, well, detectives had questions. A lot of questions. Within hours of the shooting, investigators began tracking everyone connected to Cody. Family, friends, anyone who'd been with him, anyone who might know where he was hiding or what pushed him over the edge. But the person they needed to talk to most was Dominique. She wasn't at the scene. She didn't call emergency services. She didn't check on Nathan. But she did have information. And when detectives finally sat down with her, they quickly realized something. Her story wasn't steady. In fact, parts of it didn't just shift, they contradicted each other. Still, detectives listened carefully. They needed to understand the roots of Cody's motive. They needed to know how this chain of events truly started. And they needed to know whether Dominique was simply a witness or something more. Meanwhile, Cody's silver sedan had vanished. No plates, no GPS, no trace. Detectives feared the worst. A desperate suspect, armed, unstable, and on the run. A man who had already shown what he was willing to do. But detectives had one thing Cody didn't know about. They had surveillance footage he thought couldn't see him. Footage that didn't just show the car. It showed the direction he was heading after the murder. And once detectives followed that direction, they discovered something even more disturbing. Cody wasn't just running. He was planning his next move. Nathan Anderson hadn't even been pronounced dead yet when detectives started piecing together the clues he left behind. His final moments, stumbling, bleeding, collapsing on a stranger's door camera, triggered a manhunt that grew more urgent by the hour. Witnesses described the shooter as a man scrambling into a silver sedan, driving off so fast he nearly hit a parked car. No plates, no hesitation. But investigators already had a starting point. Nathan still had his phone on him when he was rushed to OHSU Hospital. And what detectives found in that phone became the backbone of the entire case. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Inside Nathan's message history, one name came up repeatedly: Cody. Not a nickname, not a vague reference. An actual person he communicated with recently. Screenshots recovered by investigators showed rising tension between the two men. Texts, missed calls, communication that felt increasingly strained. Nothing in Nathan's phone proved a threat, but detectives recognized the pattern. Connection, conflict, and now a homicide. So they pulled Nathan's location history. It placed him at a property tied to Dominique Marie Britt, the woman Nathan was supposed to meet around 5:30 p.m. that evening. And that connection made everything click. Detectives were at Dominique's door around dawn the next day. She opened it wearing a robe, looking groggy and irritated. Not scared, not stunned, not even curious why detectives were asking questions about a man who was dying in a trauma unit. Her first sentence set the tone. "Am I under arrest?" Detectives weren't surprised. Dominique's name had turned up too many times already to ignore. Her phone was full of messages from Cody. Emotional ones, angry ones, and some that hinted at a plan forming long before the trigger was ever pulled. When detectives told her Nathan had been shot, she didn't cry. She didn't panic. She didn't even ask if he was alive. Instead, she said, "I didn't call Cody. He must have just shown up. Except, her phone suggested something else. There were calls, texts, coordinates sent, and timing that lined up far too neatly. Detectives didn't accuse her, not yet, but they noted every inconsistency, every stumble in her story, every moment she slipped into self-preservation instead of empathy. Dominique was no longer just a witness. She was a critical part of the timeline. While detectives interviewed Dominique, another team pulled surveillance footage from every business, house, and traffic camera within a mile of the shooting. One clip changed everything. Around 5:30 p.m. that afternoon, a silver sedan missing its plates was caught cruising slowly down the street where Nathan collapsed. The car passed twice, once going south, once going north, almost as if the driver was scouting. Moments later, shots were fired. Another camera caught the same car speeding away, headlights off. The vehicle matched the description given by multiple witnesses. Silver sedan, missing plates, similar body shape, same direction of travel. And guess who owned a silver sedan with no plates? Cody James Denowith. Detectives didn't need a warrant to pull DMV records. They already had them. Cody was the registered owner of a silver Chevrolet sedan, one that conveniently had its plates removed about a week prior. To an investigator, that wasn't a coincidence. That was preparation. As evidence stacked up, detectives pieced together where the motive began. Earlier that week, Dominique had told Cody that Nathan sexually assaulted her. The claim was serious, and the detectives treated it seriously. But as they compared timestamps, messages, and Dominique's changing story, things didn't match. There was no report filed, no medical exam, no witness, no photo evidence, no consistent timeline. And the more detectives examined it, the more it appeared to be a claim used to provoke Cody, not an allegation backed by any action or report. Cody's reaction wasn't subtle. Screenshots from his phone showed him spiraling. "I'll deal with him. He won't touch you again. Tell me where he is." But the most chilling were the messages Cody sent to his own family. "Help me kill this guy. I need a gun." Whether Cody believed Dominique's claim or used it as an excuse didn't matter in the eyes of the law. What mattered were his choices, and those choices now pointed directly toward premeditation. Shell casings at the scene told detectives what they needed to know. They were fired from a Sig Sauer P365. Not a common street gun, not a flimsy weapon. A compact, high-quality handgun favored by trained shooters and concealed carriers. The detectives asked Cody's family one crucial question. Does he own a gun? The answer came with hesitation, never a good sign in homicide inquiries. One family member reluctantly admitted Cody had borrowed a firearm. Another said he used to have a SIG. A third said they weren't sure. But the tone gave detectives the opposite impression. Then came the forensic match. The casings at the scene were consistent with a Sig Sauer P365 model. Not proof on their own, but another piece of a growing puzzle. By the time Nathan died in the hospital, the death officially upgraded the investigation to a homicide. But the killer was gone. Police went to Cody's listed address. Empty. Neighbors said he left in a hurry. Before dawn, car loaded, no plates. Exactly what detectives expected. That's when they learned he had been staying with different friends on and off. Couch hopping, parking in alleys, never staying long enough for anyone to get suspicious. It wasn't the behavior of a man who panicked after a mistake. It was the behavior of a man who prepared for the aftermath. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Detectives called Dominique in for a second interview. Her story didn't just shift, it mutated. First, she said she hadn't spoken to Cody in the hours before the shooting. Detectives slid her phone records across the table. Then she claimed she didn't know Nathan was coming to see her. Detectives showed her messages arranging the meetup. Then she insisted she didn't tell Cody where Nathan would be. Detectives pulled up the exact GPS pin she sent Cody earlier that night. And as each contradiction piled up, one thing became clear. Dominique knew far more than she ever intended to admit. But until they had Cody in custody, they couldn't risk pushing her harder. She could shut down, lawyer up, disappear. So detectives played careful. noting every crack in her story for later. Phone tower data finally delivered the breakthrough detectives needed. Cody's phone pinged repeatedly in the exact area of the shooting, at the exact time Nathan was killed. He didn't live there. He didn't work there. He had no reason to be parked behind houses at 5:30 p.m. Unless that reason was Nathan. The evidence was no longer circumstantial. It was converging on one conclusion. Cody was there. Cody was armed. Cody was angry. And Nathan Anderson was dead because of it. On May 5th, a week after the murder, detectives finally located Cody's vehicle behind an abandoned property. The silver sedan. No plates. Driver's seat pushed back. But Cody? Cody was nowhere to be found. And investigators were about to learn that his disappearance wasn't an attempt to run from responsibility. It was part of a much bigger plan. When detectives found Cody Denowith's silver sedan hidden at an abandoned property, it wasn't just a major break. It was a roadmap. Inside the car, investigators found clothing crumpled behind the seat and loose items thrown around as if someone left in a hurry. But what stood out most was what wasn't inside the car. No plates, no gun, no phone, no trace of Cody beyond the digital evidence. To detectives, that wasn't panic. That was intentional. Someone had scrubbed the vehicle of anything that could tie Cody directly to the murder weapon or to Nathan's final moments. But even without the gun or the phone, the car gave detectives one undeniable truth. Cody hadn't left the county. He was still close, and that meant one thing: he had help. Detectives began piecing together Cody's relationships. Friends, relatives, people he'd stayed with in the days before the shooting. Every one of them had the same reaction when detectives knocked. A pause, a hesitation, a thin moment where guilt flashed behind the eyes. Some admitted Cody had stopped by. A few said he looked stressed. Others said he spent hours pacing, whispering, staring at the door like he expected someone to burst through it. One man told detectives he wasn't right. He kept saying he messed up. He wasn't himself. But no one claimed they knew where he was now. Of course, detectives understood the game. People don't lie because they're confused. They lie because they're protecting someone. And Cody had more than one person willing to take that risk. While detectives retraced Cody's steps, they uncovered what he had been doing in the hours after Nathan Anderson was shot. Security footage from multiple convenience stores showed Cody wearing different clothes than earlier in the night, keeping his head down, checking over his shoulder constantly, buying drinks and cigarettes with cash only. Another camera caught him tossing something, possibly clothing, into a dumpster behind a laundromat. Detectives checked the dumpster. It had already been emptied. Whatever Cody threw away was gone forever. This wasn't the behavior of someone who panicked and fled blindly into the night. This was someone who took deliberate steps to erase evidence and stay ahead of law enforcement. But even more disturbing was what detectives discovered next. Phone records detectives pulled from Cody's relatives gave insight into his emotional state. Days before the murder, Cody's messages shifted from anger to obsession. Messages like, "I'll handle it. He hurt her. He doesn't get to walk away. I'll take care of it. Don't worry." But after the shooting, the tone changed entirely. He messaged someone, "It's done." Someone else received, "They know. I gotta get out of here." One relative told investigators they got a call where Cody whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go that way. I just wanted him to understand." Detectives wrote it in their notes. It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't a denial. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Detectives brought Dominique Britt back for another round of questioning, this time with a new strategy. They didn't start with accusations. Instead, they showed her the surveillance video, the silver sedan, missing plates, driving exactly where Nathan was shot, exactly when the shooting happened. Dominique shifted in her chair for the first time. When detectives asked what she knew about the vehicle, she said, "I've seen Cody's car before, but that doesn't mean it's him." Detectives pressed. Dominique insisted she hadn't told Cody where Nathan would be. She denied guiding Cody to that street. She denied knowing Cody had a weapon. That's when detectives slid phone records across the table again. And once again, her explanations began to crumble. Location data, time-stamped messages, calls at suspicious times, the GPS pin she sent out that evening. Dominique's reaction wasn't shock. It was resignation. She leaned back, folded her arms, and said, "If Cody did something, that's on him." Detectives didn't show emotion, but they wrote one note in their report. Dominique is minimizing involvement, something they'd seen in hundreds of cases before. 3 days after the discovery of Cody's abandoned sedan, a man walked into the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. He didn't want to give his name at first. He didn't want to be on camera. He didn't want to be listed as a witness. But he wanted the guilt off his chest. He told detectives he saw Cody shortly after the shooting. Not on the night it happened, but days later. Cody appeared, dirty, exhausted, paranoid, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The witness said Cody asked him, "Do you think they'll find me?" Then, she said he hurt her. "I couldn't let that slide." Detectives listened without interrupting. The man added that Cody left shortly afterward, disappearing on foot toward a wooded area. This changed everything. It meant Cody wasn't living out of cars or traveling far distances. He was hiding in plain sight, possibly in the woods, sheds, abandoned structures, or with people desperate to keep him out of police hands. One thing haunted detectives the entire investigation. The murder weapon, the Sig Sauer P365, had not been recovered. They searched Cody's car. Nothing. They searched dumpsters near his movements. Nothing. They searched the property where the car was found. Nothing. If Cody hid the weapon, he hid it well. And without the gun, prosecutors knew the case would still be strong, but much harder. What detectives did find, however, was significant. Bullet fragments from Nathan's body, shell casings from the scene, digital evidence of Cody's search for a firearm, messages of intent, and all of it painted one picture. Cody planned to confront Nathan long before that night. Whether he intended murder, the evidence leaned that way. But without the gun, defense attorneys would have room to argue. Detectives needed Cody alive to seal the case. While ground units searched, the digital forensics team worked around the clock. They recovered hidden data from Cody's cloud accounts, deleted messages, archived contacts, location history, cached map searches, notes he typed but never sent. One note in particular stood out. It read, "If anything happens, it's because of what she told me." The note was time-stamped hours before Nathan was shot. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't impulse. That was preparation. Detectives now had proof of motive, timeline, and premeditation, which meant they were closer than ever to issuing a full arrest warrant. But before they could take the next step, they needed one final confirmation. And then they got it. On May 6th, just after midnight, police received a call. A man matching Cody Denowith's description had been spotted near a rural property. Dirty, injured, and trying to break into a shed. Deputies rushed to the location. When they arrived, they found signs of movement in the brush. Footprints, broken branches, a torn piece of fabric, and a fresh trail leading into the woods. At the very end of that trail, deputies heard something that made them freeze. A voice, a man whispering, talking to himself, repeating the same sentence over and over. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Deputies raised their flashlights. They stepped forward, and then the woods went silent. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Just after deputies spotted movement and heard whispering in the trees, the woods fell silent. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing but wind pushing through branches. The deputies held their positions, scanning the tree line with flashlights. Then one of them noticed something faint. A shoe print pressed into damp soil, pointing downhill toward a ravine. Backup arrived, and the team began a slow, methodical sweep. Within minutes, they found what they were looking for. Cody. He was curled behind a fallen log, covered in dirt and leaves, his clothes torn from days of moving through brush. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't run. He didn't even speak. He simply lifted his hands. The man police had searched for across multiple towns surrendered without a fight. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't a change of heart. It was exhaustion. The kind that settles into someone who knows the story he tried to control is finally collapsing. Once taken into custody, Cody was transported to the Clackamas County Jail. Officers noted he looked hollow-eyed, sleep-deprived, physically worn down, emotionally flat. But what stood out most was how calm he appeared. Not angry, not confused, just empty. As his mugshot was taken, detectives finally had the key piece they needed. With Cody behind bars, the investigation could shift from chasing him to closing every hole in the case. Now came the part that would matter most in court: the interrogations. When detectives entered the interrogation room, Cody sat with his arms folded, staring at the table. He didn't ask for a lawyer at first. He didn't ask about the charges. He didn't ask whether Nathan had died. Instead, he opened with a question that stunned even the investigators. "Did she tell you everything?" Detectives didn't respond. Silence is a strategy, and Cody filled it. He insisted he was only in the area because he knew Nathan was dangerous. He claimed he was protecting someone. He implied he had information that would change everything if detectives would just let him explain. But the detectives weren't there to negotiate. They were there to confront him with the evidence: GPS data, surveillance footage, cell records, witness accounts, ballistic reports, and the fact that the only person who allegedly posed a danger, Nathan Anderson, was unarmed, unaware, and minutes away from death when Cody approached. When detectives finally told Cody that Nathan had died in surgery, something flickered across his face. Not grief, not shock, just a quick, sharp exhale, the kind someone lets out when the thing they expected is finally spoken out loud. But even then, Cody wouldn't confess. Instead, he leaned on the same narrative he'd been building since the night of the shooting. "She told me he hurt her. What was I supposed to do?" Detectives didn't answer. They didn't need to, because they already knew something Cody didn't. While Cody was being questioned, another team interviewed Dominique Britt again, this time with a very different tone. Detectives laid out every piece of contradictory information: her shifting timelines, the GPS pin she sent, the calls to Cody before and after the shooting, messages suggesting she knew exactly where both men would be, her inconsistent statements across interviews. At first, Dominique tried to keep her same defensive posture. "I didn't know he was going to do anything. I didn't tell him to go there. We weren't planning anything." But when detectives showed her the exact route Nathan took to her house, the route she told him to take, and then showed the route Cody took to intercept him, something broke in her. She exhaled, leaned back, and finally admitted, "I shouldn't have told him anything." It wasn't a confession of involvement. It wasn't an admission of intent. But it was the closest she had gotten to accepting that her words sparked everything that happened. And detectives documented all of it, because even if Dominique didn't pull the trigger, her role in the events leading up to Nathan's death mattered. But what Dominique said next would become one of the most significant moments in her interviews. She whispered, "I didn't think he would actually do it." To detectives, that sentence confirmed something they had long suspected. Dominique didn't expect a confrontation. She expected revenge. But she underestimated the man she was talking to. Even without the weapon, the lab had enough evidence to move forward. Fragments retrieved from Nathan's body were consistent with ammunition used in a Glock 19, the same model multiple witnesses confirmed Cody often carried. Shell casings found at the scene also matched the caliber linked to Cody's firearm searches and messages. The spent casing found inside Cody's abandoned car was the final connection investigators needed to confidently link him to the weapon, even if he had disposed of it successfully. Detectives concluded that the gun had likely been tossed somewhere remote, possibly in the Sandy River, a nearby ravine, or destroyed. But the weapon's absence no longer mattered. The digital trail and Cody's movements were stronger than any fingerprint. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. After a week of collecting statements, analyzing footage, and reviewing digital records, detectives reconstructed the final timeline of the hours surrounding Nathan's murder. It revealed Cody and Dominique communicated repeatedly before Nathan arrived. Dominique sent the location to Cody. Cody scouted the area minutes before the shooting. Nathan was unarmed, walking, and unaware. Cody approached him intentionally, not accidentally. Shots were fired at close range. Cody fled immediately, switching clothes and avoiding cameras. He abandoned his vehicle, hid evidence, and relied on friends to stay hidden. This wasn't a confrontation that escalated. It wasn't a panic moment. It wasn't self-defense. Detectives concluded it was planned, targeted, and driven by anger manipulated through misinformation. A motive built on a claim that was never reported, never investigated, and never supported by evidence. Once the timeline was complete, Cody faced second-degree murder, unlawful use of a weapon, felon in possession of a firearm, fleeing from police, additional charges tied to evidence tampering. Dominique was not charged with homicide, but investigators made it clear her role wasn't erased. Her interviews, contradictions, and involvement remained part of the official record. Nathan Anderson's family received the timeline directly from detectives, a detailed, painful explanation of what happened to their son, brother, and loved one. And while the legal process was still unfolding, one truth stood firm. Nathan didn't die because of a random encounter. He died because someone believed a story without evidence and acted on it violently. Cody's arrest didn't bring Nathan back, but it stopped a man who spent days manipulating fear, hiding behind lies, and trying to rewrite his involvement. The investigation exposed the truth. One accusation sparked anger. Anger sparked planning. Planning sparked murder. And that murder sparked a hunt that would end with a single man sitting in a cold interrogation room, finally out of places to hide. This is the story of how Nathan Anderson died, and how detectives refused to let his final steps be the end of his voice. And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, empathy, and respect for those who can no longer speak for themselves. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts below. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.